So today, lads, we're going to be talking about Stephanie White, and we're going to be talking basically what she has been saying about coaching the Indiana Fever, just when everyone thought they had Stephanie White, and the Indiana Fever figured out she drops a bombshell about her plans for 2025. In a recent podcast appearance, the Fever's head coach revealed her blueprint for the team's future with Caitlin Clark. But here's what got fans really talking. It's not what any of us expected. Look, having coaching the team that has 5 times more viewers than any other team, it's a big deal. It is a huge deal. And it's not easy. Stephanie White just appeared on a podcast, and she didn't hold back about her vision for the Indiana Fever. Remember, this isn't just any coaching job she's taken on. She's about to lead a team that's pulling in 5 times more viewers than any other franchise in the league. Talk about pressure, right? I'm looking forward to, when you think about Caitlin Clark and a generational talent, and the sometimes overlooked Kelsey Mitchell, who has been like one of the hardest workers that I've ever seen from the time I was covering her at Big Ten Network, watching her at Ohio State. And then Aaliyah Boston, who, prior to Caitlin Clark coming on the scene, by the way, this is recent, and she mentioned Kelsey Mitchell White. Started by addressing the elephant in the room, working with Caitlin Clark, she called Clark a generational talent. But what's interesting is how she's approaching this whole situation. Instead of just hyping up Clark's arrival, White's talking about building something bigger, something more sustainable. It's refreshing to hear a coach think beyond just the immediate splash of getting the #1 pick. What really caught my attention? She's been watching everything from NBA games to EuroLeague matches, looking for ideas to implement. That's not your typical coach approach. Most would just stick to what they know. But White's out here studying different styles of play from across the globe. It shows she's not just thinking about next season, she's planning for the long haul. Here's where it gets really interesting. White didn't just focus on Clark. She specifically mentioned Kelsey Mitchell, calling her one of the hardest workers she's ever seen. This wasn't just some throwaway comment either. She's been following Mitchell since her Big Ten Network days, which tells you something about White's attention to detail and her understanding of player development. So it's like you think about the pieces that we have, and in putting that all together, I hope #1 for Caitlin, that I can be a resource. I didn't have the same stuff that she has on a global scale. Thankfully we didn't have social media at the time, which amplifies everything. But I've been through it on a smaller scale, and so hopefully I can help her navigate, some of the extra stuff while pushing her to be her best and challenging her to step outside of her comfort zone on the floor. I have the advantage of I was an opponent, right? And so scouting her. And this is let's talk about what really stood out in that interview. White's being incredibly honest about where the team stands defensively. She straight up admitted they were 11th in defense last season, and that's not going to cut it. Most coaches would try to dance around that kind of stat, but not White. She's laying it all out there. They need to get to at least middle of the pack if they want to compete. The way she's managing expectations is fascinating too, while everyone's dreaming of championships. And talking about Clark breaking scoring records in her rookie year, White's focused on building the foundation. First, she talked about why home court matters, why they can't have off days, and what it takes to compete at a championship level. It's like she's giving us all a masterclass in team building. What's particularly interesting is how she's planning to use Clark's game as an opponent. White scouted Clark extensively, and she knows exactly what makes her uncomfortable on the court. She mentioned those games where teams threw different defensive looks at Clark, blitzing screens, soft hedging, hard hedging. White's seen it all, and more importantly, she knows what worked and what didn't. You want to know what's really smart about White's approach? She's positioning herself as a resource for Clark, especially when it comes to dealing with the spotlight. White mentioned that while she didn't deal with the same global attention during her playing days, thank goodness for no social media back then, she's been through similar experiences on a smaller scale. That kind of mentorship could be invaluable for a rookie dealing with unprecedented attention. The offensive side is where things get really interesting. White's got this amazing challenge ahead of her. How do you maximize a team that's got Clark's shooting ability, Mitchell's scoring prowess, and Boston's inside presence? She mentioned they're incredibly gifted on the offensive end, but she's not just looking to let them run wild. There's a clear emphasis on structure and purpose. Let's break down what she said about their offensive potential. White's background is in offense. She literally said, "Offense is what I love," but she's not getting carried away. She talked about having to scale back plans, admitting they won't be able to implement everything in year 1 or even in training camp. That's the kind of realistic approach that builds trust with both players and fans. The comparison to previous teams is really telling. White mentioned how you don't get back-to-back #1 picks by being really talented early. She's clearly learned from watching other young teams try to rush their development instead of promising immediate success. She's talking about laying the foundation for competing at a championship level. That's a coach who understands the long game. What's really fascinating is how she's planning to handle the extra attention that comes with Clark. White knows this isn't just about basketball, it's about managing a phenomenon, but instead of seeing it as a burden, she's treating it as an opportunity. She mentioned that the excitement of coaching generational talents outweighs any potential challenges they might face. Her comments about watching Kelsey Mitchell play in China were particularly interesting. It shows she's not just focused on Clark. She's studying all her players, looking at how they're being used in different systems, what's working for them, what isn't. That kind of attention to detail could be crucial in building a cohesive team, rather than just a collection of talented individuals. The defensive emphasis is something we really need to talk about. White made it clear they can't stay 11th in defense if they want to compete. But here's what's smart about her approach. She's not just saying we need to be better, she's talking about specific benchmarks, about getting to the middle of the pack as a starting point. That's the kind of concrete goal setting that players can rally behind. One thing that really stands out is how White's handling the pressure of expectations. She's inheriting a team that's about to become the most watched in the league. But she's not letting that dictate her approach. Instead of promising quick fixes or immediate success, she's talking about process, about building something sustainable. Her mention of the team staff meeting in Indiana was particularly revealing. They had to scale back their plans because they realized they couldn't implement everything right away. That's not just honesty, that's wisdom. It shows a coach who understands that sustainable success comes from solid foundations, not from trying to do everything at once. What's especially interesting is her approach to player development. She's not just thinking about how to use Clark's current skills, she's already thinking about how to push her outside her comfort zone. That's crucial for any rookie, even one as talented as Clark. The game changes at the professional level, and White seems to have a clear plan for helping her players make that transition. The way she talked about watching games across different leagues shows a coach who's constantly learning and evolving. She's not stuck in one way of thinking or one system. She's looking at the NBA, at Euro League, at the Chinese League, where Mitchell's playing. That kind of broad perspective could be exactly what the Fever needs as they build for the future. Now let's dig deeper into what White's plans mean for the Fever's future. She made an interesting point about championship-level competition that really caught my attention. It's not just about having talented players, it's about creating a system where those talents can flourish together. This is where her experience as both a player and a coach becomes invaluable. What's particularly fascinating is how White's approaching the team's offensive identity. Sure, they've got Clark coming in with her incredible shooting range and playmaking ability. They've got Mitchell, who's been lighting it up in China. They've got Boston, who's already shown she can be a force in the paint. But White's not just thinking about individual talents. She's thinking about how to blend these pieces into a cohesive unit. Remember, when she talked about watching all those games across different leagues, that's not just about collecting plays or studying strategies. It's about finding ways to maximize what could be one of the most dynamic offensive trios in the WNBA. But here's the thing, she's being realistic about the timeline. She knows this isn't going to happen overnight. The defensive focus is really interesting too. White didn't just mention that they were 11th in defense. She emphasized that this had to change if they wanted to compete for championships. Now with Clark coming in, a lot of people might expect the Fever to just try to outscore everyone, but White's making it clear they're not going to sacrifice defense for offense. Looking at the team's youth, White's approach makes even more sense. You've got Boston entering her second year, Clark coming in as a rookie, and even Mitchell, who's still developing parts of her game. These aren't finished products, they're players who need guidance to reach their full potential. White seems to understand this perfectly. One thing that really stands out is how White's planning to handle the media attention. With Clark joining the team, the Fever are about to become the most watched team in the WNBA. That brings a different kind of pressure, not just for Clark, but for the entire. Thanks for watching, and subscribe my channel.